ORI, the Ifa concept of consciousness. ORI, the Ifa concept of consciousness. ORI, consciousness. ORI is a Yoruba word used to describe the vessel that is able to process conscious thought. ORI is a Yoruba word used to describe the vessel that is able to process conscious thought. In the Ifa description of ORI, consciousness is an integration of thoughts and emotions. In the Ifa description of ORI, consciousness is an integration of thoughts and emotions. When an Ifa elder is admonishing someone to think clearly, they will typically point to their heart and not their head. The integration of thought and emotion creates ORI, or wisdom. Ifa says, Ologbon a de ogmugo, mugo, omugo, le ai, le ogbon ino, meaning the person who fails to make use of their wisdom becomes a fool. According to Ifa, ORI has four distinct arenas of perception. We think about our internal experience, identify emotions. We acknowledge our relationships with other people and things, evaluate levels of trust and empathy. We examine the past, access memory, and we envision the future, activate imagination. The four modes of consciousness can be symbolized by a circle sectioned into four equal quadrants. The four modes of consciousness can be symbolized by a circle sectioned into four equal quadrants. In the literature of comparative religion, this symbolic representation of inner experience is called a mandala. The quartered circle is a universal symbol of the self that appears in virtually every religious tradition throughout history. It is found in the sand paintings of Hopi shamans, the healing circles of Tibetan Buddhists, the temple art of Islam, the stained glass windows of Gothic cathedrals, and the markings of the Ifa divination tray. In the course of a day, the mind flips through the quadrants quickly as a method of processing information. When we encounter new experience, we examine how it feels. We remember similar feelings. We consider how the experience impacts our relationships, and we imagine the effects the experience will have on future events. When we encounter new experience, we examine how it feels. We remember similar feelings. We consider how the experience impacts our relationships and how we imagine the effect the experience will have on future events. Ifa says, Orisirisi, Edilowo, Le Yato Fun, Eda Tojade, Lauri. Meaning, at sundown, a different person enters the house than the one who left in the morning. The idea of being on a spiritual path suggests that a person is making use of specific techniques to facilitate the integration of new information and new experience. Employing the symbolic language of the mandala, we are widening the circumference of the circle by expanding the calabash of personal experience. In Ifa, many of the techniques used to train the ORI are taught in form of codes of behavior passed from one generation to the next as cultural expectations and through participation in rituals that reveal the mystery of transcendent symbols. Ifa has no monasteries and no universities. The Ifa School of Learning is the extended family where everyone takes on the responsibility of being a mentor and teacher to younger generations. When casting the oracle, Ifa diviners invoke the 4 quadrants of the mandala that appear on the divination tray by saying Iba se ila orun, Iba se iwo orun, Iba se ariwo, Iba se guusu. The east, Ila Orun, is located on the top of the tray in the realms of the spirits of air. The west, Ida Orun, is located at the bottom of the tray in the realm of the spirits of the earth. The north, Ariwa, is located on the right side of the tray in the realm of the spirits of fire. The south, Guusu, is located on the left side of the tray in the realms of the spirits of water. In psychological terms, air is associated with breathing and our experience of self. Earth, the west, is associated with survival and our relationships with others. Fire, the right side and the north, is associated with transformation and our ability to vision the future. And water is associated with the amniotic fluid and our memories of the past. The 4 components of the ORI are like spokes on a wheel, linking the consciousness of the person to similar patterns of consciousness outside direct experience. This means ORI has access to transcendent realms of perception called Orun in Ifa, and often referred to as the collective unconscious or subconscious in transpersonal schools of psychology. Ifa divination directs the diviner towards one of the 256 verses of Ifa oral scripture. The verse identifies the client's most compelling immediate spiritual lesson. Once the lesson has been identified, the diviner may give the client 2 symbolic objects, stone and shell, used to determine the orientation of the divination. This process is believed to be direct communication with the client's ORI. It's used to determine either if the client will easily assimilate and integrate the 4 components of ORI, learn the lesson and receive the blessing that comes with expanded consciousness, or if the client is in resistance to the lesson, leading to potentially self-defeating behavior. Ifa says, Owun ti won sigun ota, go sohun ti, yio fa ibiru ota, meaning, those who conquer the enemy within have nothing to fear from the enemy without. Ifa divination is rooted in the idea of conquering the enemy within. The smooth assimilation of the lesson from divination is called irie. The word for resistance to the lesson from divination is ibi. In Yoruba, the word ibi means afterbirth. Holding on to the placenta after delivery is fatal. The use of the word ibi in the context of divination suggests the person is holding on to thought forms that are resistant to the lesson at hand. I would describe ibi as opposition to embracing an open-ended worldview. Ibi is the solidification of dogma. Solidification occurs because letting go of strongly held beliefs is experienced at loss of self. It literally feels like a threat to your physical existence. More accurately, it is a spiritual death that lays the foundation for rebirth and continued growth. The death of the old self is frightened and seldom comes without struggle or resistance. Ifa says, Iberiu, eye, ye, fa iku, aratabi, ti imi. Meaning fear is the parent of premature death. Resistance to change requires full-time effort. If you focus all of your attention on ignoring your lessons, there is no time for living in the moment. Failure to live in the moment is extremely dangerous. Learning Ifa is a process of embracing modes of behavior that facilitate the smooth transition of Ibe into Irie. Anticipating the inevitable emergence of a new self from the death of the old self makes change less fearful. Anticipating the inevitable emergence of a new self from the death of an old self makes change less fearful. If Ibi is transformed into Irie, it tends to become solidified in one of the four quadrants of the Ifa mandala. Someone who is afraid of the future will remain stuck in the past. The most common example of this is the adult who refuses to grow up, wanting the lack of responsibilities associated with childhood to continue throughout life. Someone who is avoiding dealing with developmental problems will constantly run in search of a better future. I see this manifest when people say, my life would get better if only I could win the lottery. Someone who is fearful of being successful in the world can mask the fear by focusing all of their attention on spiritual matters. They do this in an effort to justify failure in practical matters by saying success is unimportant. Someone who is obsessed with success could be avoiding dealing with moral and ethical considerations that are part of spiritual development. The avoidance is often rooted in low self-esteem. This leads to the false notion that the problem can be fixed by external forms of gratification. Divination uses Ebo to break bonds of Ibi, or solidified dogma. Ebo includes offerings, healings, cleansings, rituals, and initiations, such as ways of freeing the ORI from self-imposed restrictions. Ifa describes this process by saying Mobo Orisha, meaning I make offering to spirit. If the person is in alignment with their higher self and free from shackles of dogma, Ifa says Mosin Olodumorye, meaning I serve God. Staying stuck in Ibi literally deifies the problem. Instead of worshiping Source, we worship whatever it takes to stay stuck. Christians call this idolatry. As an issue of survival, we devote all of our conscious effort to creating a world that supports our distorted vision of reality by surrounding ourselves with peers who share our limited worldview. If anyone from the circle of support deviates from the norm, they become the scapegoat, someone who is falsely accused of being responsible for the problems of the group. If the scapegoat refuses to submit to the will of the group, they are shunned, banned, avoided, and demonized. In the process, We claim to follow the guidance of spirit and imagine that spirit wants us to behave in childish ways. We claim to follow the guidance of spirit and believe we can control the future. We can control the future. We claim to follow guidance of the spirit and ignore our financial responsibilities while pretending to be religious devotees. We claim to follow the guidance of spirit by becoming workaholics, justifying the obsession for the sake of the family. Mosin Olodumare means serving God by being appropriate in the moment. By being appropriate in the moment. Being appropriate in the moment. Being appropriate in the moment can only happen if we see the world unencumbered by delusions generated by dogma. If we see the world unencumbered by delusions generated by dogma, when any group attacks a member who is not a threat, the group sows the seeds of its own self-destruction. A healthy community embraces diversity of opinions. A healthy community embraces diversity of opinions. If you want to understand Ifa as a worldview, never demonize anyone. Replace criticism with empathy. Replace moral judgment with Igbo. Replace anger with understanding, and replace self-pity with the courage to change. The fear of change is rooted in the fear of loss of self. Only when self-perception is rooted in dogma. The fear of change is rooted in a fear of loss of self. Only when self-perception is rooted in dogma. Discard the self-limiting ideas and fear disappears. Discard the self-limiting ideas and the fear disappears. Theologians define dogma as a strongly asserted metaphysical principle. Dogma is commonly associated with religious indoctrination. From a psychological perspective, most individuals create dogma during their developmental years when their interpretation of life experience is falsely elevated to an inflexible, personalized view of the laws of nature. From a psychological perspective, most individuals create dogma during their developmental years when their interpretation of life experience is falsely elevated to an inflexible, personalized view of the laws of nature. For example, a child grows up in a family where the predominant interaction with their parents involves the threat of punishment and physical abuse. The inherent need to be nurtured comes in conflict with the reality of pain and suffering. Rather than admit to not being loved, the child decides that love is expressed through violence. Growing up, the child will associate with other children who share the same worldview. It is often easier to look for external support of a dogmatic principle than it is to deal with the painful truth at the core of the conflict. As an adult, that same child might seek a religious community that sanctions severe corporal punishment of children. The dogmatic worldview gets reinforced by an extended community and is solidified as God's will while being passed down to another generation. I refer to this process as deifying an internal conflict. Nazis believed genocide was God's will. There was a time when Catholics believed burning witches was God's will. There are Christians today that believe killing abortion clinic doctors is God's will. Every American president who has declared war does so with God's endorsement. Anytime you claim another human being is unworthy of being a part of your community, you are invoking what you believe to be God's will. The only way you can convince yourself you are a prophet is to surround yourself with people who also think they know the will of God. At this point, your personal Ibby becomes communal Ibby. Communal Ibby makes the job of personal transformation even more difficult. Encouraging communal Ibby is the tactic of colonialism, better known as divide and conquer. Once an unresolved problem is arrogantly elevated to a dogmatic principle, there is no impetus for resolution. If I believe God wants me to be a racist, I have no reason to examine racist behavior. If I believe God made men superior to women, I have no reason to examine my sexism. Once we invoke God's will, life becomes very simple. The problem is the ORI knows we are embracing a lie. The more the lie becomes manifest in the world, the more likely ORI will send Eshu Odara on a mission to shake the Ibby loose and continue the process of growth. The more likely ORI will send Eshu Odara on a mission to shake the Ibby loose and continue the process of growth. Unresolved conflicts lead to tension and anger. When there is no impetus to resolve the problem, the ORI looks for an alternative means to discharge the frustration and anger. At times, this will manifest as passive aggression, the attempt to control the behavior of others by pretending to be victim. The attempt to control the behavior of others by pretending to be victim. To repress the pain of unresolved conflict, a person might deaden their senses by turning to alcohol or drugs. If the person is fortunate, they might encounter a mentor, someone who grew up with a similar worldview, who was able to break the shackles of their self-imposed dogma, might reveal how to embrace a more balanced and holistic interpretation of their experience. An example that is all too prevalent is the child who is raised to believe sexuality is evil. The inability to reconcile dogma with a natural desire can cause a person to obsess on making sure others do not enjoy what has been denied to them. The person might avoid the internal contradiction by becoming self-righteous. They might feel the need to monitor pornography in an effort to protect others from temptation. If the conflict continues, they might feel the need to join the clergy to protect their community from sin. At some point, the power of the contradiction will undermine intention, and the person may well become caught in a compromising situation. If the person feels powerless to deal with the internal conflict, they will tend to act out of their frustration against those who are helpless. At this point in the avoidance scenario, they may even convince themselves that pedophilia is an expression of God's love. Ifa divination is a tool designed to identify self-destructive tendencies before others in the community are damaged. Divination cannot work if Ifa is merely perceived as fixing a problem by magically manifesting a desired result, without taking into consideration the need for personal transformation. I am not saying that magical expressions of willpower do not work on a short-term basis. Nevertheless, it is important to recognize that it is ultimately self-defeating. When I was growing up in the 60s, The Twilight Zone and Star Trek. When I was growing up in the 60s, The Twilight Zone and Star Trek were popular morality plays. In some ways, they were the American equivalent to the stories associated with Odu Ifa. They were the American equivalent of some stories associated with Odu Ifa. Imagine, you are on a Starship Enterprise. You encounter a Klingon for the first time. His name is Dank. You look directly at Dank, not knowing that in Klingon culture, looking directly at someone is considered rude. Dank is offended by your gesture and becomes belligerent. A fight breaks out and you get a broken nose. You process the experience by assuming all Klingons are bullies. Sometime later, you meet a Klingon named Gar. You are defensive. Your body language signals the message that you are prepared to defend yourself. And you get a second broken nose. Your dogma is becoming solidified. Later on, you become stranded in a place with no food or water. A Klingon bird of prey comes to your rescue. You refuse to aid because you are convinced it is a trap. In the language of Ifa, Ibi is creating more Ibi, eventually leading to premature death rather than a blessing of long life. You remain stranded, never once looking at the consequences of holding on to a worldview that is rooted in a mistake that was originally of your own making. The negative consequences of holding on to a solidified worldview are described in the story about the two faces of Eshu Odara. The two faces of Eshu Odara. Two farmers who grew up together were best friends. When they passed the age of puberty, they both went for divination. Ifa said they must live on adjacent farms because their abundance would depend on mutual cooperation. Ifa said it was Eshu Odara who would teach them the mystery of abundance. Ifa said they needed to make regular offerings to Eshu Odara to make sure their friendship was not broken. The two young men could not imagine being separated. They could not imagine being enemies. They could not imagine living to old age in poverty. There was no need to appease the spirit of Eshu Odara. One day, Eshu Odara came to the farm of the two young men. Their land was separated by a narrow path. Eshu Odara walked down the path with one side of his face painted white and one side of his face painted red. When Eshu Odara passed, one of the young men said, "Did you see that strange fellow with the white face?" The other responded, "No, he had a red face." The two men got into an argument that led to a fight that ended their friendship. One of the tools used to break the bonds of Ibi is humility. From an Ifa perspective, humility is the ability to consider another point of view and make no assumptions about that point of view until it can be tested through direct experience. In other words, test advice before rejecting it. This requires patience and a cool head. Ifa says, "Ibinu, kose, ohun kohun, iwa susu ni ohun, gobgibo," meaning anger accomplishes nothing. Patience is the crown of achievement. Those who possess patience possess all things. Another of the tools used by Ifa to avoid creating dogma comes from the holy Odu Osa Tura. ibasa, ibase, osatura. Si otito, si ododo, si otito, ositun, si ododo, ini, so otiti nilemale. Yo ogibi o. Speak the truth. Tell the facts. Speak the truth. Tell the facts. Speak the truth are those whom the Spirit will help. Those who speak the truth are those the Spirit will help. In order to facilitate the daily assimilation of new information and new experience, let us look at just one component of this verse of Ifa scripture. The word siotito. The word siotito. A loose translation of the word would be to state the facts. To state the facts. In the words of psychology, make an objective evaluation of a new event that requires analysis. Stating the facts means make absolutely no assumptions about anything. Make absolutely no assumptions about anything. There is an Ifa story about Ogun that clearly expresses the value of siotito. In the olden days, Ogun served as the village executioner. One day, a messenger of the Oba brought Ogun a man who was accused of stealing Oba's dog. Ogun told the messenger he would only execute someone for telling a lie. The messenger said the accused denied committing the crime, and he saw him do it. Ogun cut the head off the messenger, freed the prisoner, and said, "I was the one who stole the dog." If we examine the fable about the encounter with the Klingons, we can create a hypothetical example of how being objective works. The meeting with Dank ended in violence. The assumption was that all Klingons are rude and aggressive. The only way this could be verified is if you personally knew every Klingon. An objective analysis would be to say Dank was rude and violent, without extending the parameters of your conclusion beyond direct experience. Assuming that all Klingons are violent gives the problem no place to go and provides no basis for resolution. Limiting the analysis to what is objectively known opens the door to a wide range of questions that hold the potential for fixing the problem. Did Dank have a bad day? Did I remind him of someone he did not like? Did I lie about Cuz stealing my dog? Did he have a violent encounter with another officer from Starfleet? Did I unknowingly do something to offend him? By remaining open to a number of interpretations and by not becoming locked into self-generated dogma, the door remains open to gain a better understanding of Dank, the person, a better understanding of Klingon culture, and in this instance, a better understanding of personal insensitivity. Exploring these options means it will be less likely that the meeting with Gar will start from a defensive posture. On the day the Klingon ships come to your rescue, you will be able to make an objective evaluation about whether or not to accept assistance. Ifa culture trains the younger generation in siotito through the use of a strict taboo against gossip. There are always two sides to every story, and when someone is complaining about a perceived injustice, there is a tendency to describe the event in self-serving terms. Gossip is designed to get peer support for a dogmatic point of view. In Ifa culture, gossip is considered pointless because it carries no possibility for resolution of the problem. In my experience, an Ifa elder will only listen to a complaint when both parties are present. If there is no immediate resolution between the parties, the matter is taken to the oracle for guidance from spirit. Once a problem has been fixed, through divination, it is taboo to revisit the issue. Participation in this process is part of a training for becoming an elder. Ifa says, Ikati Ika Ka Cali'sKALYPZO ORI, meaning the person who harms others when they have been harmed is unable to settle a dispute. The person who harms others when they have been harmed is unable to settle a dispute. In Oderimo, the Oba, meaning eldest father or village chief, holds court in the mornings for resolving disputes. Anyone with a problem can ask the Oba and the elders of Ogboni to settle the conflict. If the other party is not present, the Oba will send his emissary, messengers, to retrieve the other person. Nothing is settled without both parties in attendance. Those who are in dispute direct all their comments to the Oba, who seeks the counsel of his advisors and then makes a final judgment. In many ways, it is similar to a court of law. On a smaller scale, the same process is used to settle problems within an extended family. All serious conflicts are resolved openly with both parties and witnesses in attendance. During the process, the participants are admonished to say only what they know. A traditional Yoruba version of the no hearsay rule followed in Western courts of law. Removing assumptions from self-analysis is at the foundation of the Ifa concept of self-transformation. Removing assumptions from self-analysis is at the foundation of the Ifa concept of self-transformation. Such rigorous self-examination is an essential process for those who aspire to learn divination. To take one example, the verses of Odu Ifa make frequent reference to the possibility of good fortune coming from a significant stranger. Using our hypothetical example, if the diviner has a bias against Klingons, the Starfleet explorer who comes for divination will not be told to welcome the rescuer from the Klingon bird of prey. There is an aspect of Ibi that periodically showed up during divination that took me some time to fully understand. It involved the appearance of Elenini, meaning disruptive elemental spirits. At first, it was not clear to me what exactly was meant by elemental spirit. Over time, I developed a theory based on experience and observation. It may or may not be true and is impossible to prove because it involves a particular theory about the structure of reality. The theory helps me dispel Elenini. So at the very least, it is a good working hypothesis. I believe there is a thin veil of invisible light on the boundary between dimensions of reality. This light can be understood as pure, unformed consciousness. The light can be easily molded by human thought. As a result of this interaction, there is a global netherworld of phantoms shaped by human suffering and despair. The light can be easily molded by human thought. As a result of this interaction, there is a global netherworld of phantoms shaped by human suffering and despair. Shaped by human suffering and despair. If a person is avoiding transforming Ibi, they will look for someone else to blame for their problems. If there is no one to blame, they will create an imaginary demon that they can claim is responsible for the disruption in their life. If the need to create a demon is strong enough, the thought form will take shape and the monster will materialize in the physical world, giving apparent confirmation. Giving apparent confirmation, the problem is external and not internal. The current psychological literature on demonic possession has gathered convincing data that shows childhood victims of trauma create the phenomena as a form of protection. If you are being attacked by an adult, the best defense is to seek the aid of a monster. Behind every satanic possession is a wounded child. In Ifa, this phenomenon is called Elinini. Real spirits always respond to the power of the word. Real spirits always respond to the power of the word, to the power of the word. If you tell Igun or Isha to leave, they leave. Elinini does not respond to the power of the word. The more you try to dispel it in a ritual context, the stronger it gets. If a ritual exorcism is effective, the old Elinini is replaced by a new manifestation far more powerful than the original. If a ritual exorcism is effective, the old Elinini is replaced by a new manifestation far more powerful than the original. The only way to destroy Elinini is to starve it to death. By this, I mean you have to slowly work away at the internal conflicts that freed the spirit. The only person who can destroy the Elinini is the person who created it. This won't happen until the person is ready to accept responsibility for the real problem. If you try to banish an Elinini in a ritual context, the person who created it will view the ritual as a threat to their identity, you see. They will resist the process by attacking you. They will resist the process by attacking you. There is no easy solution to this problem. There is no easy solution to this problem. My best recommendation is to refer the person with the Elinini to a mentor, someone who has effectively transformed the real issue. The Igbo, or ritual cleansing, ends up looking more like a 12-step program than an offering to spirit. The Igbo, or ritual cleansing, ends up looking more like a 12-step program than an offering to spirit. It is my hope that as our communities gain more insight into this particular issue, we can share information on effective resolution. Far too often I see the manifestation of elemental spirits given inappropriate credibility by the extended family, and this is extremely disruptive because it can infect an entire community, making everyone distracted by the problems of one person. Making everyone distracted by the problems of one person. The pattern becomes especially dramatic if messages from the Elinini are given the same weight as messages from spirit. The whole concept of the extended family as mystery school is based on the concept of mentoring. If you are teaching someone who is younger than you, the idea is that you have gone through whatever experience the student is struggling with. As a result, you can give them the best benefit of your life lessons. In simple terms, anything you have fixed in your own life can be used as medicine for someone else. Ifa says, "Otun, osi, le owo, fi mimo saka." Meaning the right hand cannot wash itself without the support from the left hand. The idea of mentoring informs the way traditional Yorubas greet one another. It is considered rude and inappropriate for a younger person to ask an older person how they are doing, or how they are feeling. The reason for this is because in the Ifa mystery school, a younger person does not offer opinions to give guidance to an elder based on the admonitions of Siotito. Asking a person how they are doing carries the expectations of an honest answer. If the older person has a problem, the younger person simply is not old or wise enough to offer an appropriate response or solution based on life experience. If you can't assist in fixing something, there is no point in discussing it. If you cannot assist in fixing something, then there is no point in discussing it. In Ifa culture, it is not acceptable for a younger person to tell an older person what to do by claiming the message came from spirit. A message from spirit directed towards a particular person would be taken to the person's elder for evaluation before being delivered to the intended recipient. One day I was walking through ORI. In the middle of the afternoon, it was very hot. I noticed that everyone but me was inside in the shade, keeping cool. I decided it was time to return to the Araba's house. On the way home, I got sick. A grandfather came out his house and asked me how I felt. I told him I had an upset stomach. He went back into his house and continued walking. When I reached the place where I was staying, there was a box of stomach medicine on the front porch. The grandfather asked me how I was feeling because he was in a position to fix the problem. How that medicine got to the house before I did, I will never know.